All this talk about running has me thirsty.
Me too. Sorry, I had a YouTube video start auto playing on me. My bad.
Disaster.
Joe, say your transition again. Try one more time, buddy. You got this.
From ScienceSortOf.com, you're listening to Science Sort of.
Hello and welcome to Science Sort of. You're listening to episode 319. Our theme this episode is standing up to satellites. I'm your host, Ryan, and joining me to talk about things that are science, things that are sort of science, and things they wish they were science is the most stand-up guy I know, Joe Batwinnis.
That was cheesy for reasons that will soon become clear.
And we are so glad to be returned by, technically speaking, one of our good friends, Jacob Stump.
Hey, it's been too long.
Sure has, man. Glad to have you back, Jacob.
Yeah.
Glad to be back.
Funnily enough, I've hung out with you both in person in the last month, but we weren't all together, so we couldn't record anything.
No.
I mean, but Kelly was there. We could have recorded something. We just decided not to.
We decided not to. That was the right call, I think.
I think so.
Joe and I almost slid my car into the forest.
Yeah.
Jacob. Yeah.
Alternate title, Joe and Ryan went off-roading.
Not intentionally. Or at least not as intentionally, with less intentionality than we desired.
Sliding on ice or sliding on something else?
Wet grass.
Yeah, wet grass / mud on a downhill off-camber slope. Heading towards a tree.
Yeah.
Many trees.
Sounds fun.
It's called the forest, Joe. I know you don't spend a lot of time outside, but when all the trees are together, that's just the forest.
We don't even have a tree here, so I don't know what to do with multiple trees.
Well, you know, Joe, it's interesting that the climate aridification that led to the decline of forests and the rise of grasslands in certain parts of sub-Saharan Africa may also be the reason that you can stand up and run around in this here world. So,
Really?
I think so. Let's talk about toes. Jacob,
Okay.
did you read this article?
I skimmed it.
Okay.
It's not my forte. So,
But you're a runner, or at least you were a runner. So that's why I sent this to you. We read an article from the BBC News Science and Environment website called "Being Human: Big Toe Klingon Longest to Primate Origins," which is based on a paper that was published in PNAS on the evolution and function of the hominin forefoot. First author is Peter J. Fernandez, with a lot of other authors helping out. And the general idea here is that the big toe in humans was evolutionarily one of the last parts of the foot to evolve, which is pretty cool.
It's pretty important, too.
Yeah. So they're saying that it was the last part to evolve, like...
Oh, no. Am I on my internal microphone?
Direction?
I'm on the wrong microphone. So that's,
Oh, that sounds much better.
oh,
yeah.
Why don't you guys say anything?
I don't know
know.
what you normally sound.
I normally sound better as a professional.
Well,
Hang on. All right. Since we were literally like 2 minutes in, I'm just going to start the show over.
oh my God, there are so many good puns, though.
Just leave it.
Okay.
I can hardly stand.
Nope, wait.
Your
All right, here's
mic
what we're going
quality.
to do. And now that I'm using the correct microphone, we can dive into the first topic we wanted to talk about, which is based off of a BBC News article called "Being Human: Big Toe Klingon Longest to Primate Origins," based on a paper in PNAS, The Evolution and Function of the Hominin Forefoot by Peter J. Fernandez and others. And so according to this research, the big toe on the human foot was one of the last things about our foot to evolve. So I thought that was kind of cool.
I'm still a little confused by it. I'm raising my hand in the back of the classroom.
Okay, let's
saying,
work through
teacher, but like the big toe evolved before humans were humans. The big toe evolved to whatever it was before modern humans, right? Which was
what they really mean here is the big toe as a short, rigid part of the human foot, as opposed to a grasping digit, like on the ape foot.
Okay.
They lost that thumb, and it just kind of moved up to be a regular toe.
But the interesting thing about it is that was one of the last parts of the foot to adjust from the more typical primate condition, or I guess the more typical ape condition, especially. So if you think about our foot compared to an ape foot, or if you want to be very specific and look at like a chimp foot, chimp feet, they have a really big gap between their big toe and the rest of their toes, which lets their foot function more like a hand. So it's a grasping thing. and they're much better at grasping with their feet than we are.
Uh-huh.
They also walk on the flats of their feet when they walk upright. So they don't have an arch in their foot like we do. We still technically walk on the flats of our feet as well, but you'll notice that chimp feet don't have any arch in their foot. And so what this study did is they took a bunch of 3D scans of toe bone joints from living humans, fossil humans, and primates such as apes and monkeys, compared them to modern day humans, and basically put all of these different toe joints on the evolutionary tree of primates to figure out when different features evolved.
Okay.
And what they found was that the big toe, or the hallux, in the way that we use it, the way that our big toe is configured, evolved relatively late. And that's important because we are the only ape that is obligate bipedal, right?
Obligate meaning
we have to walk on 2 feet. Okay. So we cannot be quadrupedal without without great difficulty. It's clearly not the way we are meant to move around. If you try to move around on all fours for any significant period of time, your back's going to hurt, your knees are going to hurt. Like, it's not going to go great for you. The proportions aren't right.
My legs are too long.
If you guys have seen the way that Andy Serkis does the mocap for the Planet of the Apes movies, they've built these forearm stilts, is the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, they're like extensions to his forearms.
Right.
So that he can pretend to have longer arms. So
he can knuckle walk without having to bend all the way over so that his actual knuckles are touching the ground. He's got basically knuckle extenders. And so something like a chimp, you could say, is maybe a facultative quadruped biped. Like, they can function on either 4 limbs or 2 limbs. They're probably a little bit better on 4 limbs, but they also, and if they're in a tree and they're on a narrower branch, maybe they stand up on 2 legs and hold a branch above their head. So like an assistive form of bipedalism, right?
Right. And they're certainly not running on their feet.
Right.
At least not for long periods of time.
Yeah. When they're moving as fast as they can on the ground, they're using all 4s.
Yeah.
Something like an orangutan, they're almost obligate quadrimanual. Like, none of their feet really, like, none of their limbs really function as legs. Basically, they have 4 arms. So
really,
more or less, like, the way they move through the trees, it's essentially like they have 4 hands to work with. They're really good at moving carefully through the trees. So, apes have these different strategies for moving around, but in the ape world, humans, we are the best at walking on just 2 feet, and we're the only ones, like Jacob kind of hinted at, we're the only ones that can run on 2 feet. And so something that's interesting, as far as my understanding, this is something I looked into a fair bit in college, but that was a while ago at this point, so the research has progressed, and this is one of the progressions that we've made, is that being able to walk bipedally probably didn't evolve at the same time as running bipedally.
Oh. And maybe the big toe, maybe why it evolved later is because maybe running evolved later.
That's what I've
thinking.
Heard. Yeah, so there's a bunch of different ideas of why did humans evolve to run on 2 legs. One that I mentioned is because climate change led to a decrease in the forests. So if there's less forest cover, there's less of a need to always be able to climb. And if you've got more grasslands, maybe the ability to move quickly through those grasslands while also having a sight line above the level of the grass was really useful, right? So there's this idea that, like, there's a lot of talk of, like, pursuit hunting or persistence hunting, where you run
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Is that a real thing? Like,
that's where you just, like, chase something until you're exhausted and
exactly.
Just catch it.
I've seen on some nature documentary, I can't remember what it was, where they had some, like, African tribe that was hunting gazelle or something like that, and they did just that. They chased it for an entire day, and they weren't really running the whole time. Like, they were walking until it saw them, and then they would chase after it, and then they would walk again. But eventually it was so tired that it couldn't keep running away, and by that point the people had run maybe like 10 to 15 miles over the course of that day. And I guess the premise was that no other creature other than humans and I guess dogs to a certain extent can deal with running those kind of distances. And that was a strategy that allowed them to hunt animals that were larger than them or that were faster than them. And so that's an ability, something that evolved as a way for us to be able to get higher calorie meals. It just seems like a stretch. It seems like that's something that maybe, like, some humans figured out how to do.
It makes us like we're the Terminator, right?
Yeah.
Never stop. So there's some interesting lines of evidence to suggest that may have been a way that some early peoples hunted back in the day. One thing that's worth pointing out is there are hunter-gatherer tribes that exist today that do hunt that way. So that is a method of hunting that humans do still use. So that method had to come around at some point. The question is, was that an ancient enough part of our hunting methodology that's part of our evolution as runners? That's where the debate comes in. So it's a little bit more nuanced. So it's not trying to throw out the entire concept, because the concept clearly works. But what do you need to make that concept work? You actually need a group. It's not really a way you can hunt alone, right? You have to have tracking. You have to have multiple runners usually, so you can kind of tag team it relay style. It clearly does work. There's some interesting reasons why it works pretty well. It has to do with like the human running. Humans can change our speed at which we run without changing our gait substantially. So we can run at variable speeds while using about the same amount of energy. Like it costs more calories to run faster, but it doesn't cost as many calories as like a horse going from a trot to a gallop. So that's an interesting aspect of human running, where we can speed up or slow down just a little bit and it doesn't cost us that much. Whereas with other animals, when they have to change their running style, it's a bigger shift. And also because our chest is held upright and we're not flexing our back in these big kind of up and down. If you like see a cheetah run, like their back is like almost a sine wave, right? In the way that it's flexing, which affects your ability to breathe while running, because your lungs are in your chest. So if you're compressing and expanding that, your ability to breathe while running at full tilt is changed in ways that may not be optimized for continuing to run for a long time. Humans, because our chest is upright, we can actually keep breathing pretty well the whole time while running. And we also have evolved, we've lost a lot of our hair, and we've evolved the ability to sweat. And most animals can't sweat to get off the waste heat from expenditures like running. And so animals, they have to pant, or they don't. They just need to find shade and hunker down. And so part of it is that we are more thermally better at cooling down than animals that we were hunting were. The issue is that it's hard to find evidence of a hunting style like that in the fossil record. Like, what do you look for, right? What would be your clue that a kill site, even if you could tell that it was humans that had killed a thing, or an early hominid, what would be your evidence that they had ran that thing to exhaustion? So it's a hard thing to test.
You almost need just like cave drawings to say, this is what we did today, and the next day, and the next day.
And by that point, you've got tool use.
Detailed procedure.
And by the time you got cave paintings, you have to have tool use. You can't have a cave painting without knowing how to use tools. So at that point, you've got a weapon. So having a spear changes the dynamic of that style of hunting entirely, right? Because the idea is this style of hunting, you can kill something with a rock. It's because it's so exhausted, you just walk up and hit it.
Right.
All of those traits that I mentioned, or at least most of those traits that I mentioned, are also consistent with the idea of early humans as aggressive scavengers, where because we could stand upright and look out over the plains above the level of the grass, we could see if carrion birds, vultures, and buzzards were circling, and then we would know something's dead there, and we would just take off after it and then just chase the birds off and eat whatever they were trying to eat off of.
Tasty.
So like some lions brought down something big. They couldn't finish eating the whole thing. Humans, early humans, hominids, whatever, would just sprint to the kill site and just chase off all the other scavengers, with our rocks and sticks, and then eat whatever we wanted ourselves. So again, being fast and being able to get to the kill site first is a huge advantage in that scenario.
Gotta have some guts to like chase off. Maybe the predator's still there. That'd be bad. I don't know.
A lot of times big kill sites like that, depending on the animal might have died from like drought or exhaustion or some other thing. So it's not necessarily a kill site. If it is, a lot of times, the prides of lions, they'll eat their fill and then they need a nap because they'll eat a lot in one go. Something like a leopard might try to stash their kill up in a tree, but we were still pretty good climbers. So, a leopard or a cheetah, like they're not that big. If I had to guess, the main thing, and then birds, you can always chase off a bird, like humans.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. So really, it was probably hyenas that we really had to contend with. I'm guessing the lions, by and large, were too sleepy. Cheetahs and leopards are solitary. Birds we can chase off, but a pack of hyenas or African wild dogs would be tough to contend with, even as a group of early humans.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we would have the advantage of being able to see that they're still there from very far away, and then if they start running after us, then we would be able to run away and keep running for longer without getting tired.
Well, I think the thought is we
As long
would
as you
get
didn't
there.
get caught.
We would get there first, right? Because if we can see above the tree line, or not the tree line, but above the grass line, we would see the birds circling as our clue, and we'd take off before the hyenas even knew there was a kill to go after.
I see.
Maybe by the time they smelled it and got there, we could run off and leave it to them.
The other idea is that humans were one of the last groups of animals to come scavenge at a site, and we would have to use our cunning and maybe some early tools to break open bones, and we were eating something that was a high nutritive value like marrow, but is more difficult for other animals to access. If you've ever seen if you've ever seen a hyena go at a bone, there's maybe some more thought that needs to be had on that one, because a hyena can just chomp through a bone like it's not really even there. It's kind of insane.
Huh.
That's terrifying.
Another much simpler idea for why we evolved bipedalism in the first place is, as the grasslands opened up, there's not like big fruit-bearing trees, right, which are a great caloric resource if you're a climbing ape, but there's lots of little widely distributed bits of nutrients in the form of like small seeds from the grass themselves. And so if you want to take advantage of that resource, you're probably going to need to eat a lot of them, and they're distributed out across the grassland. So if you can pick up a bunch in a hand and then move to the next patch of that grassland without having to put down what you're holding, that's a huge advantage. So it could be as simple as like walking on 2 feet is useful when you're not scavenging, but foraging for a widely distributed, low caloric value, but widely available resource.
And looking to bring it back to perhaps somebody else, as opposed to just eating it on the go.
Yep. Yeah. And then that also frees us up to carry tools. I know I mentioned this with chimps, but it's possible that while we're really still like apes living in the trees, being able to grab stuff above your head and hold yourself up to walk on 2 legs along a branch is super useful. And we see apes do that today. So that might have been some of the earliest examples of us standing upright to move around in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So does this research kind of lend more credence to one hypothesis or another? Does it make one more likely than the other?
It lends credence to the idea that running was something that probably came later. Mm-hmm. To me, what this research shows is that as an ape, having a foot that can grab things is really useful. Like, that's a really nice thing to have. And so there had to be a lot of evolutionary pressure for that to be one of the last things to kind of flip over to our current modern configuration, where the big toe is a much shorter, relatively rigid thing that helps us push off while running. So, there's always, I feel like there's always stories about people who lose their big toe and like it's so hard for them to walk. And thanks to modern shoes, like that's not really true. But if you didn't have your big toes and you tried to run barefoot, like you would have a pretty hard time. I texted my dad about it just to make sure that I wasn't speaking outside school there. But he did say, people being able to walk without a big toe, shoes do play a big role. Without a big toe, you will definitely diminish push off and performance. And so part of that gets back to that arch in the foot I mentioned, Jacob. So like having an arch in your foot is hugely helpful if you want to run, because that acts like a spring. It gets you some of your energy back on the bounce, on the down step. But then having that big toe there to add some rigidity and support in that push off too, I think would have been huge. But it suggests that like having a grasping foot worked really well for a long time. And so there had to be something really, really advantageous to losing that if getting the big toe that we have now was worth it,
Yeah. Well, what sucks about the arch in your foot is that plantar fasciitis is a real pain.
I don't know what that is, though.
Is that just flat-footed? It hurts like real bad.
No, it's not from being flat-footed. It's basically like for a long time they thought that it was like a tendinitis style of injury, and that's why it's called fasciitis. But it's the thing on that your arch is this mixture of muscle and tendon and other tissue called the plantar fascia, and it extends from the bottom of all of your toes all the way to your heel, and then it actually is continuous all the way up behind your heel into the Achilles tendon and into your calf muscle. So there's one continuous string of muscle and tendon that has all sorts of connection points all through there. But basically, there's lots of different ways where you can injure the tissue that makes up the arch of your foot. And the most common injury is right around the heel, like right forward of the heel. And you can get that from overuse, from running too much, or from acute injuries. And long story short, it takes a really long time to heal, or it's not an easy thing to heal because we use our feet so much. So if you get an injury, like let's say you're walking barefoot and you step on a rock, and you get a major bruise on the bottom of your foot and it swells, that can be like a starting point for plantar fasciitis. That's not how most people get it. Most people get it from just walking poorly or having bad shoes. It's really
I got it from just standing around on a hard hanger floor for an extended period of time with crappy shoes.
Yeah, bad shoes is the most common root cause for plantar fasciitis. But the long story short is that when you get it, it's really hard to get rid of because we use our feet so much, and that plantar fascia is in movement so much. There's still a lot of research being done on it. Like they figured out now that it kind of sort of maybe isn't related to inflammation. And so there's talk amongst the medical community of renaming it from plantar fasciitis to plantar fascio. I don't know. I can't remember the other name. But because there's so many different root causes for it, there's not one great healing modality for it either. I don't know if that's the right term because I'm not a medical person, but basically what works for one person might not work for the next person to fix the plantar fasciitis. Generally speaking, it takes 3 months minimum for most people.
Yeah,
even if you're doing exercises and rehab every single day, it can take up to 3 months.
I ended up getting a pair of Red Wing boots, and they're like a lifesaver.
Nice.
Yeah.
So the other couple of things that this study showed that I think are things worth mentioning is that it seems like having a big toe that's still opposable, that you can still use to grasp things like a thumb, still means you can be functionally a biped. So it means that the big toe that we have now isn't a prerequisite for just being bipedal, which again, I think that does come around Jacob saying that like the big toe really was something that is better for running. And it also basically means that we didn't lose that grasping toe until we were just done with trees.
It does mention that it is like 4.4 million years.
That's Ardipithecus ramidus. That's one that we think would have still been able to walk upright, but probably still spent a lot of time in trees and has that not older. Well, I guess it is technically older, but I'm not saying older in like there's no value judgment in it being older. It's just the more basal condition. Whereas it was probably within our genus of Homo where we got that toe joint that we understand today as our normal toes.
Right, but like millions of years between being like bipedal and gaining that toe and maybe developing running. Yeah.
And the other thing is if we could figure out a way to find butts in the fossil record, that would help too. Because
the muscles?
The human butt, if you think about your butt, Joe, your specific butt.
Okay. Thinking about my butt.
Compared to other species of apes, we're basically the only ape with a tuchus. Like all the other apes have like pretty flat butts.
I guess the picture of the ape is just kind of like mostly just crotch area. You don't get a good shot of his butt in this picture in the article.
Oh, the orangutan?
The orangutan.
Yeah, but look how flat that butt is. No, that's the butt, Joe. They're basically showing you the butt, and it's not a lot there. So the human butt is really... We use that while running. It's a great muscle. It's developed into one of our largest muscle groups because we use it while running, and that's such an important part of being a human. And then I think in truly modern humans, I think it's also a characteristic that's been sexually selected for, which happens. You see that from time to time, even in human populations.
You guys should Google
like big butts and they cannot lie.
I was going to tell you to Google ape butts.
And what did you find?
World's best monkey butt stock photos.
Oh my God. We're going to go incognito for this search.
But you see what I mean? Most of them have pretty flat butts, unless they're like purposefully inflating the butt for a sexual thing. But they're not, it's not like I'm telling you, man. Think about butts, Joe.
Bright red monkey butt.
The Google gorilla butt.
So I got a flat butt.
Not gorilla butter.
Is that a thing? That sounds disgusting.
What's gorilla butter?
It autofilled. Apparently, it's a product that you can buy in California and Colorado and Oregon and other states.
Gorillas are mammals. They make milk.
I mean, gorillas got some butts. They got some butts. They're just strong.
I just think your face evolved to look like an ape's butt. We'll add that to the topic talk.
That might be a little too sort of even for us. Yeah, but I mean, if you think about like if a human was all right, so if you look at like a male silverback gorilla standing upright on two legs, if a human was that well muscled, would the butt be that flat and small? No, it wouldn't.
It'd be a great big badonkadonk.
Exactly. So I think you got to think of in the proportional sense. Do gorillas have a proportionate response butt relative to human? I think we got the best butts.
All right. Off the top of my head, I can't argue.
Yeah. There's not a lot of good arguments to make against it. So Jacob, do you feel like you get the article now? Did we do it?
Yeah, I think
do you have more questions?
I think I got it. It makes sense to me now.
So it seems like the next thing they're going to do is they're going to start applying the same research approach, which is pretty cool. Like, I like the idea of taking a really specific adaptation or a really small part of an organism and comparing it across organisms in evolutionary time and space to see when things were changing and what lineages and what that might have been used for. And it sounds like this research group is going to do that next with the remaining bones of the forefoot. And so I think that will probably, I'm guessing they'll be looking at the arch in the foot, and it'll be interesting to see if the arch in the foot shows up. My guess is this is going to show up earlier, but maybe it won't.
My guess was that it develops like as that toe moves forward, right? Like it's in that same spot, right?
All right, let's each make a prediction.
I predict that they developed gradually simultaneously. Like the thumb moved forward to become a toe, and as it retreated to the toe area, an arch developed.
Jacob?
I'm in agreement with that too, because you in order to put the big toe where it needs to go, like I'm looking at my hand right now.
Yeah, no, I'm doing it too.
I'm imagining my thumb moving forward to be relatively even with my other fingers, and that big muscle area at the bottom of your thumb, like what would that have to turn into? I think it would have to turn into some sort of supporting material. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that becomes the ball of your foot.
Works? Right? Is that how evolution works? I don't understand.
All that muscle at the base of your thumb like becomes the ball of your foot, kind of, right? Along with all the muscle.
Well, I guess the question is, so here's the question. This is how I would frame the question, thinking as an evolutionary biologist and not as an engineer, is what is the cost benefit? So what is the trade-off from going from flat-footed to having an arched foot? Like, do you get a benefit from that if your toe is still opposable? Versus, do you get a benefit from having a rigid, non-opposable toe with still having the flat foot? Or is the benefit only there if they happen at relatively the same time?
Okay, so I'm going to have to get into a technical detail about how your foot works when you run in order to explain this. So this is a really weird thing. If you put your foot on your knee, like you take your right leg, put it on your left knee, and you pronate your foot so that you're pulling your big toe up and pulling your tiny toe towards you, the muscle, the bones and everything in your foot at that point are all movable, and you won't be able to see this if you have shoes on. You have to be barefoot for this. Your foot has a lot of flexibility when it's pronated, the whole of your foot. When you're stepping on uneven surfaces, when you're like walking through the woods, it's almost like your foot can adjust to the surface while it's pronating, so that if there's a rock on one side of your foot, that part of your foot will move, but the other part won't. But when you run, when you push off with your foot while you're running, your foot will supinate. It'll go out the opposite direction, and that stiffens up all of the other parts of your foot. So
and that's what you want when you're running, because that's the most efficient way to run.
It turns your foot from something flexible and floppy into something that's stiff and allows you to launch off with more force. And this is something I just learned about because of my plantar fasciitis. So that capability of being able to stiffen your foot is directly related to the function of your arch. Like your arch is being activated or being stiffened, being stretched when you're pushing off more than when you're not. So it's like it goes back to what we were saying of there had to have been some sort of major advantage to allowing your big toe to having the big toe no longer be able to grasp things. And that's why I think that the arch had to have evolved at the same time, because if you're going to, in order to be able to run, which is, I guess, what our leading hypothesis is, you have to also have an arch in order to get that maximum efficiency of being able to launch off.
Yeah.
It's probably hard to describe. I'm not good enough with anatomy to be able to describe it over a podcast, but there's a really good video on YouTube from a channel called Athlean X. They have a lot of like fitness videos, and they have a video on plantar fasciitis specifically, and he has a skeleton model that he shows the pronating and supinating of the foot and how it stiffens up and how it loosens. So it's worth looking up.
Yeah, well, if you can send me a link to that video, I'll include it in the show notes.
I will try.
All right. Well, that's interesting. This is a cool little study.
All this talk of running has me thirsty.
Boy, howdy. Well, there's one thing I've learned from ape butter. It's that there's ape milk. So maybe that's what we're drinking in the next segment. What are we drinking? Coming up next. So it would not be an episode of Science Sort of if we didn't also talk about what we are drinking. Joe, you're just off work. You're the most recently enabled to have a drink. So what are you having a drink of?
I am actually having alcohol.
What?
Weird,
what?
Right?
New year, new you, man. No dry January for Joe. Wet January, dry 11 other months.
I guess, yeah. Yeah, so I'm having a White Russian, which is, I do occasionally have...
I was right, someone is having milk!
Yeah, you were. I didn't make it with ape milk. I made it with regular whole milk.
Which
organic.
Jacob told us in between segments is weed, and I'm sure people were like, oh, these straight edges don't even know. Yeah, Jacob and I were straight edge in high school. I don't know what you want us to do about it. Like, we're lame. Yep. Get over it.
Yep. We're all lame here. But yeah, I'm having a White Russian.
What's in a White Russian? It's not a drink I make for myself ever.
Oh, it's Kahlua vodka, and it should be really cream, but I just use whole milk.
How is it?
It's delicious, per usual.
Nice. Well, Jacob, what about you? What are you enjoying?
Well, I am having a delightful little beer that I I got from Aldi. Because I had never had any of the beers from Aldi before. I'd had a lot of the wines from Aldi before, and I'd always been really impressed with them. But the beer,
for people who don't know, Aldi is like a very it's a very budget friendly grocery store.
Yeah,
like half the lights are turned on, and you just put things in boxes or wheelbarrows. And
so I don't know if you guys have Aldis where you are, but the Aldis,
we do.
The Aldis where I am, they're really nice. Like. It's not the Aldi of Appalachia that I remember.
They were founded by the guy who founded Trader Joe's brother, right? It's like a weird family split between like
exactly
boutique-y, everything's wrapped in plastic for discernibly no reason. Trader Joe's and Aldi, bring your burlap sack, you animals.
Yeah, apparently in Germany their family owned the same grocery store, and then they split into like a northern and southern region, and one brother owned one section and the other brother owned the other section. And then when they came to America, one of them started Aldi and the other started Trader Joe's. So
I'm sure your story is correct in my headcanon, to talk like the kids talk. I'm going to imagine they got stuck on opposite sides of the Berlin Wall. And
Aldi on the international website, it is called Aldi Nord and Aldi Sud.
Yeah, I just have to believe that like the Aldi we have in the States today was like the communist East Berlin Aldi, and then like the Trader Joe's was like capitalism, wrap everything in plastic, hooray! Right.
So for those of you that have not been to an Aldi before, when you walk into an Aldi, if you want a grocery cart, you have to put a quarter into the grocery cart in order to get it to unlock from the rest of the grocery carts. And if you want your quarter back, you have to put it back in the grocery cart line. Otherwise, it stays in there.
Which is a great system. It's the same. They do that in Canada.
It is a great system. They also
you 3D print a quarter slug.
People do that. I've seen that a lot.
Yeah. And you keep it on your keychain.
I think in Canada, it's a full loonie.
Oh, wow. I don't know what that is.
$1 dollar coin.
Okay.
So the Canadian dollar coin has a picture of the bird, the loon, on it. So they call them loonies. And then the $2 coin is called a toonie.
Oh.
Because Canadians are just delightful.
That's cute.
It is cute. Good job. Good job, America's plucky kid brother.
Well, and up until recently, Aldi did not accept credit cards. They only would accept debit cards and cash. And I guess Costco also did the same thing for a while. But now they accept credit cards. They still don't have any plastic bags, so you have to bring your own bags. But that's becoming more common too. So Aldi's slowly becoming less and less awkward.
Yeah. In California, plastic bags are banned.
Yeah.
So I have I say I have a reusable bag, and people apparently don't know what that means. So I have a nylon bag that I bought from a grocery store that I now bring with me every time I go to the grocery store, and I keep it in my work bag. And I forgot it one time, and I posted about having forgotten it online on Facebook, and it was the most activity I've had on a Facebook post, because my post is basically, do I go all the way home from work to get my bag and then go back to the store and backtrack? Because I bike to and from work, but if I was just going to run to the store for a minute, I would take my car. So if I just went straight from the store, if I went straight from work to the store and used a plastic bag and then just went home, would that be better or worse carbon wise than going all the way home, which is overshooting my store, grabbing my reusable bag, getting my car going? It was so much debate.
It's almost certainly better off riding the bike to the store and getting a plastic bag.
That's what I did. And then people were like, "Well, just reuse the plastic bag." I do. We reuse all the plastic bags at least 2 or 3 times here in the house before taking them back to the same store where they have plastic bag recycling, whether or not that actually gets recycled. But apparently my terms were vague enough. People assumed that I was driving to and from all over town. I was like, no. There's no driving involved in one of these scenarios. And there's just a small bit of driving. It's just, I couldn't believe the fervor with which people were coming and bringing their. Yeah. Also, I learned people make a lot of assumptions about you.
Online? No, never.
Yep, crazy.
First time hearing of it.
Well, for the people that are assuming what beer I'm drinking right now.
We were talking about you.
It's the Kinru Blue, which is a Belgian white ale. So it's essentially a Blue Moon, not quite as citrusy as the Blue Moon, but for what it is, it's quite nice. Yeah, it's good. It's okay. I could drink it. I have been drinking it.
Does it make you want to write a Facebook rant?
No.
Does Blue Moon usually have that effect on Jacob?
No.
I don't know. I miss Jacob's Facebook rants. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, I haven't been on Facebook in a long time, so I haven't ranted in a long time.
I know. I miss it.
We're going to have to create a deep fake Jacob. Because we know Facebook won't take it down.
Right.
Blue Moon gets a lot of crap for reasons of varying degrees of legitimacy. But I'll say this. Blue Moon is the beer that got me into beer. It was the first beer that I drank that I thought, hey, that's interesting. That doesn't taste like I thought beer was supposed to taste. And then I got into other beers, Rogue, Dead Guy Ale, and took a long time to get to IPAs. But
my gateway beer was Newcastle Brown Ale.
Yeah.
Haven't had one in a long time. Don't know what I would think of it if I had it again today, but that was the beer I remember first. That same revelation, Jacob. I'd been to the crappy, high school parties where it was just Bud and Bud Light, but Red Stripe was another good one that I liked early on. I'll still enjoy a Red Stripe every once in a while. But that's not what I'm having tonight. It is a red beer, but it's red because this beer, guys, is about leukemia and lymphoma. Which just sounds like a weird way to introduce a beer.
You're having a cancer beer?
Sort of. I'm having a beer called Lifesaver from Solace Brewing Company. It's an India Pale Ale brewed with Mosaic and Falconer Flight hops from Sterling, East Virginia, which is how I refer to the Commonwealth of Virginia, because they lost the war and they should have changed their name. But that's not this brewery's fault. This brewery is doing a nice thing, and they are donating part of the proceeds to this beer to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, because, as they say on the can, every 3 minutes, someone in the U.S. is diagnosed with blood cancer. Solace Brewing is proud to support LLS in their mission to cure leukemia, lymphoma, Hodgkin's disease, and myeloma. A portion of each Lifesaver IPA sold goes to supporting LLS. Please join us in helping those affected by grabbing a beer and becoming a Lifesaver today. And it's also a pretty good beer, so happy to help.
Nice.
Hooray.
But I just wanted to, I thought, this isn't like the middle of the ice bucket challenge or anything like that, but I feel like it never hurts to point out that there are causes out there. We love our Patreon subscribers, but you could also help a cancer person if you wanted.
A cancer person.
Sorry, we're not supposed to call them that these days. A person experiencing cancerousness.
You got to be a little more politically correct than that, Ryan.
When I say cancer person, I mean crab person. I mean a person who's crab shaped, like a giant crab man, like the second season of The Tick, which I don't think anyone's watched. So
nope.
Yeah, no, I meant a crab person, Jacob. I'm not racist. I just
okay.
Crab people.
Crab people are like Mr. Crab, SpongeBob.
Like Mr. Crab. He's a cancer person.
Yep, he's a cancer person.
I'm lost.
Cancer. The word cancer comes from the Greek for crab because some Grecian physician thought that an early tumor, or one of the first tumors recognized as a bad malignant thing, they felt was crab shaped.
I did not know that.
I thought you were talking about star signs.
Well, yes,
but I guess that's the same thing, huh?
Yep. You've really you put it together. You've really pinched that link shut with your crab claw.
I didn't know that the cancer sign was a crab. I was just like, oh, maybe it is, and then what Ryan's saying might make sense.
I like the silent musing of like, how can I make what Ryan is saying make sense? Exactly. How do I put it together?
Maybe he's talking about star signs, and maybe the sign for cancer is a crab. Then what Ryan's saying would make sense.
And you did it.
Yep. I'm real smart, me.
High five.
This is fun, guys.
Welcome back, Jacob.
Psst, Jacob, you had a transition.
Did I?
Oh, you know what I love about this beer is the smell of hops, Jacob.
You were so excited about it.
You're so excited about it, Jacob.
Oh man, what's that smell, Jacob?
Oh, yeah. That transition. Oh, you guys smell that? You smell that?
I smell something.
Not hops. That's not hops. That's my new Musk. It's called Arrogance by Elon.
See you in the next segment, everybody.
Oh, good luck cutting that.
Nope, I'm leaving that leaving it all in. That entire pause of you not remembering.
The 5-second pause where I was scrolling through the chat to try to remember what my joke was.
So good. That your own failure is so much better than the joke itself.
Yep.
All right.
It's okay.
Joe used to have a show here on the network called Technically Speaking. The entire Technically Speaking back catalog of episodes, Jacob, is available on SoundCloud.
Oh, that's good to know.
Neat.
So if you go to the Science Sort of SoundCloud page, you can find all their old episodes. Joe helped me get them up there. And you guys used to we can never quite tell to what degree this was sincere or not, have a segment called the Elon Musk Happy Hour. And
this week on Elon Musk's Twitter specifically.
Yeah, that's right. I was trying to remember.
I called it the Elon Musk Happy Hour. I think I'm going to change it to the Elon Musk, or not so happy with Elon Musk Happy Hour, because is it just me, or people used to be like, oh, Elon Musk is the real life Tony Stark. Like, no, this dude's Lex Luthor. We have to stop him. We need an alien from Kansas to punch him in the mouth. Like, what is happening, Jacob? What is happening?
Okay, so I think 6 years ago, we were all very surprised that Elon Musk was not a crazy person yet at that point. Like, all of the other...
the last episode aired September 2nd, 2014.
Yeah. So all of the other, like, people that you could kind of sort of say may have been similar to Elon Musk in real life history, like Howard Hughes, they were nuts. They had crazy, weird things about them that pretty much everybody knew about during their lives, and it was very public. So it was kind of weird that Elon Musk got away with that he had lived so much of his
got away with. That was good.
Okay.
Got away with.
All right, fine. Got away with getting. I don't know that he had all that craziness up until then, because like within the last 5 years, he's had a lot change in his life. Not just all of his companies becoming wildly successful, but he's also have been through a divorce. He's had kids. Like, there's a lot of reasons why we may be witnessing a mental breakdown right now. But
he did recently tweet that he puts that quote, "I put the art in fart."
I did see that, yeah. But to be clear, that was not out of nowhere. That was in reference to the whoopee cushion feature on the Tesla software in the cars.
Isn't that old at this point, though?
It is, but somebody on Twitter was talking about it, and he replied. Okay. He replied to it about the farting. Anyway, if you've not been in a Tesla yet, people, when you get in there, there's a way you can make any of the seats in the car fart with the software. It's funny. It's funnier than it sounds. Anyway, yeah, he's going a little bit crazy now, but the companies are still running fairly well. One of the things that I had submitted for the podcast today is an article that I knew would trigger Joe, and that's why I submitted it.
Did you include a trigger warning, Jacob?
I did not.
No, I'm sorry, we can't use the story.
The headline is Tesla is the most valuable auto company in the history of America.
I see there's a big asterisk at the end of that headline.
There is.
Okay.
There is. And the asterisk really doesn't change it all that much, because the asterisk is there because Tesla doesn't just make cars. They also they've rolled in their solar panel business and the battery business. But the majority of their business is still the vehicles. Oh, and the solar panels. Did I say solar panels already?
You did.
I did. Okay. So just delete that whole last sentence. Go ahead, Ryan.
I refuse. I can't delete while we're recording. I don't know. You used to have your own show. I don't know why this is so hard for you.
Because I did all the editing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's true.
So, yeah. All right. So Tesla's doing very well, but in part because they sell more things than cars. I must admit, the batteries, especially like what's the one for your house called?
Powerwall.
That's pretty cool. I think that, to me, that seems like a legitimate game changer for solar, because I find that when I talk to people who aren't as familiar with maybe their energy options, one of the big confusions around solar is still the idea that like you're generating power during the day on your house while you're not there, and then you're pulling from the grid at night, and like that sort of explaining the balancing act that the power company is basically using you as a source during the day for other things, but then giving you power at the back and they just charge you the difference, sort of thing. Like, yeah. It's not super intuitive for people who haven't thought about it a lot or looked into it deeply.
And it varies greatly by utility provider.
Yes.
So they all charge differently. And so the advantages of a Powerwall can vary widely.
No, the advantages of solar can vary wildly.
Well, both.
Yeah, but then the idea of a solar wall of like you use your solar panels to charge your own power source. It's not necessarily, you're still connected to the grid, but I just like that idea of like I'm charging a thing that I can then use later.
Right. Yeah, and right now the power walls are still very expensive. Like the battery itself and the function that it provides and the utility that it provides, unless you're in an area where power outages are relatively common, it's not going to provide. For most people, it's not going to be able to pay for itself the way that solar panels can. But if you add an electric car into the mix, then you're talking about an overall system that has synergies that help all of those components pay for themselves. You're generating energy from the sun that you then use to charge your car. The battery is there helping power your home at night. There's even a feature where the battery can take some of the power from your car during a power outage. So if the battery is running low and your car still has enough juice, then you can allow the Powerwall to take some of that energy to keep powering your house.
Really? I didn't know they had enabled that.
Yeah, I think that's only on, you know what? I'm not 100% sure that is enabled. I know it's a feature that they said that they wanted to have and that was in the works.
Yeah, that's referred to as vehicle to grid, and it's been a talking point in the electric car industry for probably decades at this point, and it doesn't really ever get realized. It's an interesting idea. The problem is, like, in the situation you're describing, it would be for like an emergency where I don't have any grid power and my power wall is running low.
PG&E it's going to burn your state down unless they turn off your power.
Right, exactly. Which, happens out here in California. And so if you have a power wall, you can use the power wall, and then if the power wall gets low, but you have a Tesla Model S with a fully charged battery, well, you get maybe a few more hours out of the Tesla Model S, but then your Tesla Model S is dead, right? But
until
there's been talk for years.
Joe.
Until the sun comes back.
I mean,
maybe.
It sounds like you're dealing in a nuclear winter scenario where like the sun is gone.
The problem too with solar is that often in a grid blackout, you have to disconnect your solar so that your solar panels don't electrocute the lineman that's coming out to fix the power outage.
That's easily fixed now, though. Most of the grid connections now are automatic with that too. If they detect that there's an outage, they're automatically going to stop the panels from sending power to the grid, but they can still send power to the power wall. So I was wrong. I was wrong that it can't use the car yet. It is in the plans, but they do have a couple.
To clarify real quick on Joe's point, but if the power outage was being caused because PG&E turned off the power because of a fire, then there's no need to come out and repair anything. So you're not necessarily.
Yeah, it doesn't matter though. So it's just a simple like relay, right? So the grid powers a relay which opens a contactor or closes a contactor, which allows the solar power to flow from your solar panels into the grid. If there's no power coming in from the grid.
Yeah, I'm not arguing
you're right.
That, like,
it could work. It could still work.
Yeah, but exactly. I'm just saying that the risk of electrocution is only a factor when the need for repair exists. So if it's no need for repair, that it just increases the degree of insidiousness of like you've got this ability to generate your own power, but PG&E still says no, you can't have any.
Yeah. You just need to be able to disconnect from the grid when the power goes out. So instead of disconnecting your solar panels, it should be if the grid power fails, you disconnect from the grid and allow the solar panels to still run your house.
Yeah.
I dig it.
But in any case, I think the reason why they started making the Powerwall product is really just to scale up their battery operations, because the same battery cells that are being used in the Powerwall products are the same batteries that are being used in the Tesla vehicles, are the same batteries that are being used in the utility grade battery backup systems that they installed in Australia and a couple other places. It's kind of like they said, hey, we need to scale up our battery production, make a commercial product, make a consumer product that will use some of these batteries that's not being used in the cars, because there were already battery backup systems available, and there are alternatives to the Tesla Powerwall that are cheaper, that work exactly the same way, that really have no downsides other than the fact that they just don't have the Tesla logo. So it's not a novel product the way that their cars are. It's just another way for them to make more batteries and start getting those economies of scale with their battery production.
Plus, when batteries end their useful life for transportation purposes, you can still, quote unquote, recycle them into other storage use case scenarios that don't have the same demands as like actually transporting something.
That's actually a fairly new trend that we're starting to see.
No, but I went to a congressional hearing and heard about it because that's my job now.
That's awesome. No, like a lot of the old Nissan Leaf batteries that had major problems because the Nissan Leafs didn't have any form of cooling in their batteries. They were seeing like 50% battery degradation. Those batteries were able to be recycled to become RV and boat batteries. So RVs and boats, if it's big, if it's bulky, it doesn't really matter on an RV or a boat typically, or at least compared to the size of the RV and the boat. So they could take this relatively large battery from a Nissan Leaf and they're like, so what? It's only 50% the capacity that it was originally. We can still use it. And it's a great battery for an RV or a boat because the density is still way higher than lead acid batteries, even at 50% battery degradation.
Yep.
So Anyway, to get back to the controversy behind Tesla, if there is any controversy.
What do you mean if? They're going to ruin the night sky.
But before we get to that, the whole thing about Tesla being the most valuable auto company in the history of America is 100% based off of their stock valuation. It's not based on the amount of cars that they're producing. It's not based on like actual cash reserves or anything like that. It's just based on their market cap, and their market cap is way higher than GM, way higher. I'm looking at it right now. It's almost 3 times Ford. It's almost double GM, 4 times Fiat Chrysler. And a lot of people for a long time have been saying that Tesla is overvalued, and I don't think that they're necessarily wrong. But the thing is, they just continue to keep beating expectations. And
the hype machine is very strong, right? But
it is.
And while in Q3 2019 they churned out what looks like, I don't know, let's say $170 million profit or net income. In Q2 2019 they lost $400 million. In Q1 2019 they lost $700 million.
Yeah, but that's
similar losses in 2018 and 2017.
That's not uncommon for tech companies like Amazon, it's different. It's uncommon. It's different for automakers. It's not uncommon for tech companies. So like Amazon, it took forever for them to post a profit, and that's I think that's what Tesla's business model maybe is that they're whatever profit that they are making, they're trying to reinvest into greater production, greater market penetration. So we're not going to see Tesla fail until it fails horribly.
Well, we're not going to see it fail until the venture capitalists stop supporting it, basically.
I don't know that that's necessarily what's going on. I think it's just that they are they're getting some venture capital, but that's not what's allowing them to survive. They're surviving based on the fact that they continue to grow bigger every year than they were last year. They're over 50. They sold 50% more vehicles this year than they did last year, whereas every other car company in the world sold fewer vehicles in 2019 than they did in 2018.
Sure. But in 2018, I mean, Q2 2018, they only sold 40,000 cars. So they've got lots of headroom to improve. And they do make a neat product. So, and the 20
neat?
and
neat. You're using the word neat.
It's neat
to describe the vehicle equivalent of the first iPhone.
Yeah, you should see how dirty Jacob's Tesla is. It's not neat at all. It's completely disorganized. It's a mess, Joe. It's a mess.
I believe it. He's got a dog. Primes.
He's got his dirty primate toes all over the thing.
All right, so you guys just revealed my secret. I am now a Tesla owner, so my opinions here are biased, okay? But the metaphor that I use to describe the Tesla to everybody is, Joe, do you remember the last generation of cell phones before we transitioned over to smartphones? You had the Sony Walkman phone where it could play MP3s. It had a web browser.
I mean, just say the Motorola Razr. That's the only...
Motorola Razr,
that's
sure.
the only one that mattered before the iPhone.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or the Nokia Brick. Those were the 2 phones we had.
I mean, shoot, there were even really advanced Blackberries before the iPhone that you could send emails on and everything.
I just wish my iPhone could play Snake.
It doesn't matter because the iPhone on paper had the exact same functionality as all of those other old phones, but it started a revolution in the way that we use our phones because of how they put it all together. And that's what the Tesla products feel like, is they feel like there's a lot of things in the car that are not unique to Tesla, but they're doing it in a way that nobody else is. And they're doing it in a way that a lot of the contemporary car companies are saying is not possible, and yet Tesla's doing it.
So, I mean, the Tesla's big advantage is that Tesla only sells electric cars, and they don't use a dealer network to sell them. And so while the major automakers are handicapped by their dealer network, Tesla has the flexibility to not deal with that.
I'm sorry, Joe, but that's
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Because
an advantage would be something that somebody else couldn't just decide to do. Like any of these other car companies could decide to do that if they wanted to at any time. And they didn't.
I don't think they could.
Wait, why do car manufacturers have to use dealer networks?
So in some states it's a law. In Michigan it's a law. West Virginia is another one. The dealer networks are very strong.
It's sort of like alcohol, where it's like that, the producer, distributor, seller system. Like the people that make the alcohol can't be the ones who distribute the alcohol. The people who distribute the alcohol can't be the ones who sell the alcohol.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So
that's a system I'm more familiar with. I just wasn't sure if it was the same.
And there's a momentum to it.
Out of 50, and in both of those states there are loopholes that allow Tesla to still operate within the state with service centers and repair people and superchargers. So those are moot points.
I don't know that they're moot. There were lawsuits about it, but there's also a momentum of having that dealer network and all the lawsuits that the major OEMs would go through if they wanted to divorce themselves.
What does OEM stand for?
Original equipment manufacturer. So your General Motors, Ford, etc.
Thank you.
But they could,
if they wanted to divorce themselves from those dealer networks, it would be lawsuit upon lawsuit. Even if they just started selling as another option, a public option, if you will, to use an analogy.
I'm tired of these socialist companies like General Motors.
That's right.
So Saturn, I'm going to bring up, you guys remember the car brand Saturn?
Of course
Saturn
I remember
had
Saturn.
dealers.
Okay. So, but they didn't originally.
Their shtick was just fixed pricing.
No, their shtick originally was that you test drive the car at the dealership, but you order it from us and we ship it to you. Well, that was one of their shticks. But they didn't plan to stock dealers with lots and lots of Saturn vehicles. It was going to be a custom order style system, just like Tesla's is now. But the dealers themselves are the ones that fought back against that, because they said consumers are not ready. Consumers want to be able to walk onto the lot, buy a car and drive off with it. And I think that while that may be true for a certain subset of people, I think it's just that's what we've become used to. And in Europe, especially in urban areas in Europe, car dealerships operate very similarly to Tesla. They have a few vehicles where you can test drive them, and then you place an order and you wait for it to be delivered. And in their case, it's just because there's not a lot of space available and real estate's expensive. But
it's a very American system, but there is still the momentum of that system, right?
But my point is, I don't think you can call that an advantage that Tesla has, because it's something that any of those car dealers could just decide to do. They could decide to say, "Oh, this particular car that we're selling, the Ford Mach-E, we're going to have one at most dealers, but if you want to buy one, you have to order it."
I don't have a ton of experience buying cars. Every car that I've had in my life so far has been used, and I'm fine with that. I've been very happy with the vehicles that I've had. But for me, the times where I have driven a car, either helping friends purchase a car or even testing out different used cars, my feeling is always like, if the car that is on the lot doesn't have the features that I want, then I would be perfectly... I've never understood the American mentality of I'm going to walk into a car dealership and leave with a car. How is that a one and done thing? Why wouldn't you want to select options and then wait for the specific product to be delivered? I've even dealt with this at the Apple store. If they didn't have the type of iPhone that I wanted in stock, I would be like, okay, then I'm going to order it online and just wait, because it's a very expensive thing that I'm going to use all the time. Why wouldn't I exercise a little patience and restraint to get the one that I want, even if it's not the one that happens to be in stock? So I'm not agreeing with Jacob. I would never do that, but he's got a point, Joe.
So Ryan, I would argue that you're in the minority there.
I probably am, but
I mean, Ryan's the minority.
I'm in the minority for not agreeing with Jacob. You're saying most people agree with Jacob?
Oh no, with wanting to buy a car, nobody wants to agree with Jacob, but not being willing to just buy a car off the lot, right?
That's so weird to me.
It is, but for most people, it's just an appliance that get them from A to B.
No, man, it's the Black Pearl. It's a ship. It gets me anywhere I want to go. It's Jack Sparrow's ship.
I get what you're saying.
Gets you anywhere in the world. It's amazing.
I'm the same way, but I've bought a car off the lot.
even calling it an appliance isn't apples to apples, because a lot of people go into a Best Buy, they say, I want that refrigerator, and they say, okay, we'll deliver it to you in 3 weeks.
Wait, Joe, you've taken a car off the lot your first visit?
Yep.
Wow.
Twice.
You think you know a guy. You think you know a guy, Jacob.
Both
you know
of my electric cars. But that's partially because they've
because they hadn't sold any of the electric cars, so everything was still in stock.
Well, so for the Fiat 500, there were really only like 2 options. But even with the Volt, the way car companies make cars now, everything's in packages, so there aren't like tons of options. It's just, does it have the package or not? And
right.
I found a car that had pretty much everything I wanted. It had some stuff I didn't really care about, but whatever.
And if you do your research ahead of time, like you kind of know what you're looking for, and the test drive is really just a formality to make sure it doesn't
explode.
No, make sure that you don't sit inside it and say, "Oh, never mind, I hate this car."
Right. Or
no offense to anybody that drives a Prius V, but when I got inside the Prius V, I almost got out of the car immediately and didn't even do the test drive because I hated the interior so much.
And no offense to that dealer guy in Boulder, Colorado, but I'm sorry, my buddy and I didn't really tell you that we were using you to remember how to drive manual.
And no offense to people who drive Model 3s. I don't really love the Model 3 interior.
Ugh, that's blasphemy, Joe. No, I totally understand why people don't like the Model. Some people don't like the Model 3 interior. It's my style, but I totally get why it's not everybody's style.
Can we talk about Elon Musk ruining the night sky?
Yeah, sure. Starlink.
Yeah, let's do that. Because I could talk about Tesla all day, guys.
So could I.
Because, your Tesla may run out of battery, but Jacob's battery for talking about Tesla never does.
Never dies. Never dies.
Supercharged.
So
you want me to introduce this?
Yeah, go ahead. Before I start yelling.
Okay, so
we still have to do a thesis after
I think there's actually a bigger story behind this, but I'll get to it. So SpaceX, just within the last year, has started launching these satellites that are designed to orbit fairly low and provide internet service at some point in the future. And they're part of a future constellation of satellites that's going to be thousands of satellites large that will cover most of the Earth and provide constant 24-hour internet coverage through satellites. There are already satellite internet providers out there, but they typically use geostationary satellites, which stay in the same place relative to the Earth's surface.
They're stationary in a geosense?
In a geosense.
So they're geostationary.
I didn't want to get too technical with you there, Ryan.
Technically speaking.
Yeah. But the disadvantage there is that the speeds that you can reach with a satellite that's geostationary are not very fast because the satellite is just really far away. The geostationary orbit is, I'm going to have to look it up, but it's very, very far away compared to even the International Space Station. So geosynchronous orbit is 22,236 miles above the Earth's equator.
I think stationary is like 360 or something like that, right?
The International Space Station maintains an orbit of 250 miles. So we're talking 2 orders of magnitude greater for a geostationary orbit. So the satellite internet that is available right now is very, very slow. The SpaceX system, they're calling it Starlink, will be fairly low orbits. I don't remember exactly what the orbit number was, but I'm going to look that up as well. But in order to have full coverage of the Earth, because they're going to be orbiting so quickly, there has to be a lot of them. So right now, there are 180 Starlink satellites already orbiting above Earth. They sent them in 3 groups of 60. That makes SpaceX the largest manager of satellites of all companies in the world. They manage more satellites than any other company in the world. Private. So like the U.S. government obviously has more satellites than that, but the controversy behind this is they launched these satellites kind of without a lot of warning to the scientific community. And as soon as the first batch of 60 got up there, astronomers just started noticing that they were extremely bright in the night sky, like way more bright than a typical satellite. And they're not so bright that they'll be visible with the naked eye, but they're so bright that they're ruining telescope images, long exposure telescope images, just by passing over the viewpoint of the telescope, it's overexposing what might take weeks for an image to expose. So it's really been a major pain point for astronomers. And they launched the first 60, and then they launched another 60, and now they just launched their third 60. And it's still not an issue that's been fixed, but they did put one of the 60 that's in the current batch that just went up has a special coating on it that's supposed to make it less bright.
So we've got 180 satellites.
Yeah.
159 of which, plus or minus one, are making astronomy really difficult to do. And the satellites
in very specific parts of the night sky.
And the current satellite network currently provides no service.
Yes.
So I'm going to go ahead and just pre-bleep myself this guy.
So I'm going to go a little conspiracy theory here. The
satellites are doing something.
Came out of nowhere. Like there was no webpage for Starlink. There was no like press release for Starlink until the first 60 satellites went up. I think that there's some partial government funding behind this system. They are very small satellites. Like if you can launch 60 of them
I want to start a Kickstarter for a giant laser to knock these things out of the sky. Like, I mean, the goal of providing people internet, noble, doesn't say. I mean, the internet that will be provided with these satellites, like, have they said, is it intended to help people in areas where internet access is not readily available, or is this going to be is this going to be the Tesla of internet for big boys with all the cash monies to throw around?
So the early orbits were specifically put there to be in place for areas that don't have great internet access right now.
So like I can agree that's a noble goal, but doing it with no warning, with no maybe there was consideration of the scientific community, but it doesn't feel like there was a lot of consideration from the scientific community. So the American Astronomical Society, AAS or AAS. I work in a building that's for the American Association for the Advancement of Science. So that's AAAS. That's a very easy acronym because you said AAAS, but I'm not sure. I know some folks at the American Astronomical Society. I should ask them, but until I can, it's the American Astronomical Society. They had a conference in Hawaii. They dealt with this at the conference, and it's not great, Bob. Like they keep throwing out these new satellites. They've tried this coating on one. We're not going to know until next month if this coating worked.
Right.
Is the coating only on one, or is it on?
It's on one of the 60.
One of the 60.
Wow. All right.
Joe.
That's not great.
And I don't know if you've seen the picture of how they're stacked inside of the nose cone, but they're like sandwiched in there. So whatever coating they put on it, I don't even know if it's going to survive launch.
What's crazy is that they just kind of spring launch out from the launcher.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I guess a few caveats. Starlink's not the only company launching constellations of small, potentially bright, low orbit satellites. So this is going to be an issue for astronomers regardless. So, once astronomy figures out its massive sexism problem, I hope we're able to figure this one out too. I don't know why. I'm just going to throw everyone under the bus today. I'm getting salty. Jacob has brought out the salt in me. The article that we're referencing, and there's a couple articles in the story, and I kept hearing like Elon Musk satellite network threatening to ruin astronomy, blah, 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 blah. It sounds like it potentially is going to have big problems for our ability to do weather forecasting, weather prediction, weather modeling, climate modeling. Like the downstream impacts are potentially quite large in ways that I think will frustrate the average person more than they are anticipating in hearing about this. And maybe like is the net trade-off for providing this style of internet to parts unknown, is that a decent compromise? I don't know. That remains to be seen, but I think it could have been handled and deployed in a much better way, which gets back to Jacob's conspiracy mongering, which I have no information on.
Let me add some more juice to this conspiracy.
Well, hang on, real quick. I wanted to just point out that one thing that this article that we read on the BBC, and the article is called SpaceX Starlink Mega Constellation Limited Time to Fix Brightness Issue. And the end of the article is a nested tweet. The first tweet is from Ethan Siegel, who says, hot and guaranteed unpopular take on mega constellations of satellites and their impact on astronomy from AAS 235, the astronomy community has already surrendered. When you are attacked and you placate rather than fight your attacker, you will be defeated 100% of the time. And then someone named Mark McCaughrean said, I fear Ethan may well be right. It's a matter of asymmetric timescales, and I think this is the key. On one hand, scientists are used to conducting thorough studies over years, while on the other hand, industry is simply going to go ahead and launch 60 new satellites every fortnight. Yeah. And I think that's the problem here, is that the pace the scientific community is used to dealing with and responding to changes and even threats, even existential threats. There's no mechanism for science to respond quickly enough for someone like what Elon and Starlink and other constellation satellite corporations are going to do, because they're just going to barrel ahead and know that there's no real repercussions, because scientists aren't.
Well, it's very much like the electric scooter companies and Uber and Lyft, right? And just replace scientists with government, right? The tech companies just come out and they do a thing, and then governments are just too slow to react. It's basically the same thing.
I thought you were going to say the taxi companies, not government, but I see your point.
Government, so like the scooter companies, right, for government.
Yeah. In this case, though, this is where I'm adding the juice to the conspiracy theory. All of these satellites were approved by the FCC. There was actually a recent story in December of 2018, so just over a year ago. There was a company called Swarm Technologies that launched 4 satellites without government approval and had to pay $900,000 fine to the FCC. That's just 4 satellites. So, and they were CubeSats too. They weren't full size satellites. They were actually a quarter U CubeSats. So, one size CubeSat, which is like $10,000 to launch, right? The fact that they got a $900,000 charge for 4 satellites that probably didn't even cost a quarter of that, and yet there's not been an FCC fine for any of Tesla's satellites, means they got government approval for this. So what's the fault in the process for government approval of satellite launches that is completely missing the scientific community? Like, the scientific community needs to be in that loop. When a satellite gets approved for launch, there needs to be somebody that's advocating for the scientific community that says, hey, this is going to screw up a lot of research.
Yeah, Ryan, is there like a type of person who advocates on behalf of science for government?
I can think of one for the earth sciences, but I would say that I've had coffee with my counterpart at the American Astronomical Society, but that might be putting too fine a point on it. All these big scientific societies have people whose job it is to liaise with the government and advocate, and in some cases actually lobby. There are actual lobbyists. The distinction between advocacy and lobbying is advocacy, you're providing information, you're not asking them to vote on any specific matter in any specific way, whereas lobbying, you are actually saying, I would like you to vote in the interest of the people I represent. So there is the opportunity to reach out and work with government. I don't know anybody who has contacts at the FCC. Like, I don't know how that happens. So that's an interesting wrinkle. Like, everything I interact with, it's all based on the legislation happening on Capitol Hill. So like, if I meet somebody from EPA, it's because they were brought in to testify on an issue relevant to that subcommittee who happened to do something with EPA. So like, I don't have no part of my job is being like, I'm going to go talk to somebody at EPA, I'm going to go talk to somebody at NSF. It's all about like, what are the legislative priorities and how do those intersect with the different agencies? So you bring up a good point, Joe, but I honestly don't know, like, if I wanted to advocate in this, if I wanted to, like, if I put myself in the shoes of somebody working at the American Astronomical Society, like, I don't know where I would start with an issue like this. And maybe that just means I'm bad at my job. So that's possible. Well, but I hope
I'll tell you this. I just found the FCC approval for the Starlink constellation.
And it says secret government reasons. No. Oh, okay.
The number of satellites approved for Starlink so far are 7,518.
This goes all the way to the top.
Yeah. So this is a lot of satellites that have already been approved by the FCC.
Yeah. My guess is that at no point in the FCC's approval process did they think to contact anyone at a scientific society, nor do they particularly care.
Yeah, probably.
My guess is that science is so low priority. If the approval had to go through NSF, maybe or one of the agencies whose job is to actually care about the science, maybe. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me that it got approved without consulting or thinking about what the potential scientific downstream effects are.
So I'll play devil's advocate for just a short moment. This problem is not new. This is a problem that has existed on satellites before, both low orbiting satellites and geosynchronous satellites. They provide not just visual interference, but also radio interference that has been messing with research for decades. And what we've been able to do is we've been able to combine modern signal processing technology to filter out the known frequencies of radio interference from those satellites from the radio observations. And we've been able to take the known orbits of the satellites that interfere visually and automatically exclude them from observations. So that's been something that's been done for the last couple decades, and it's mostly done in software. It's not to say that we can't do that in software with these Starlink satellites. It just makes the job a lot harder.
If Mr. Musk is willing to fund several Lagrange point satellite observatory platforms and a dark side, I guess the far side of the moon observatory platform to make up for this egregious attack on the scientific community, I think maybe we can start talking terms.
Let's do it. I want a Lagrange point like space station for interstellar travel.
I mean, eventually the James Webb Space Telescope is going to launch.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying you make amends with massive gobs of money to put observatories and satellites in really cool places so we can see stuff above the range of his little Starlinkies.
Yeah. And hey, if the anti-reflective coating actually works, then most of the issue that astronomers have been having will go away. It's not that the satellites themselves have been occluding their visual data, it's they've been overexposing it. So if they can just get the reflectivity down, then this might not be as big of a problem as it seems.
I feel like we're just going to cut to a documentary about this whole issue 20 years from now, and it's going to be like, there's going to be a transcript of a meeting where Musk is like, can we make them brighter, though? There's no reason. I just want them to be brighter.
I mean, that's kind of like Starship. It's shiny because it's cool.
Yeah.
Why is it uncoated stainless steel? Because it's shiny, and shiny is cool.
Yeah, I'm not ready to let him off the hook for that one.
It's a new alloy. I don't know if that's really a new steel alloy, but they're claiming it is.
It's not. They're definitely just using polished stainless.
Joe is so not an Elon Musk fanboy anymore.
So off the train.
He's the opposite. He's like super skeptical now of everything Elon Musk.
Super skeptical of the thing the supervillain is doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a supervillain yet.
Right.
He might be in the future.
Because he's not villainous enough, or because he's not quite super enough is the question.
No, because most of the stuff he's doing is stuff that I advocate for.
Just
solar, renewable energy, electric 5G. Vehicles, space travel.
Going on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yeah, smoking a blunt while holding a security clearance.
Listen, nobody ever said that engineers have great social skills, okay?
Especially not engineers, because who were they talking to when they said it?
Right. They were talking to an audience full of people watching a truck launch where you then broke both windows.
That was the worst performance of Windows since the Windows 95 launch.
Yeah.
Where Bill Gates tried to launch Windows and it failed.
Yeah.
Was that 95? I hope I got that right. Maybe it was 98.
I don't know.
Yeah, it was one of them. It might have been like maybe it was 98.
You get the joke, though. The joke is that there's two different kinds of windows.
It was a good joke.
Yeah,
one of the windows is an actual window to a thing, and the other windows is like a software platform. Like, that's the joke.
Right. I heard at least 10 listeners laughed, Ryan. It was good.
Okay.
Those 10 listeners can probably send us an email if they think that joke was any good. I was going
to say, speaking of awkward social interactions, it's time to head on over to our final segment of the show, the PaleoPOW. Pow. PaleoPOWs, a segment of the show where we delight in the musk of our listeners. And
Gross.
we're going to start, you know what? Every time we've had an interview show, I always say we're going to do the patron thesis last because it'll mean we have more to discuss. But I think we should just do the patron thesis last, Joe. What do you think?
I'm fully in support of doing patron thesis last.
I always wanted to honor them by doing it first, but I think we end on the high note of the thesis. So instead,
and there's more material.
Yeah. Jacob, can you start us off with some laughing?
Sure. Wait, hold on. Laughing. I was looking at the other one. Sorry. Laughing. Let me pull that up. Sure. We got an email from Cameron L. who says, "Hey, Ryan and pals. Watched Jurassic Park with you guys, and I was laughing my ass off. My roommate was confused why I was laughing so hard. You guys should do this once a month. Love the show, Cameron." Thanks, Cameron. Was I on that Jurassic Park one?
Yeah, because you were the one.
So.
You were the one who figured out the. Technically speaking, how did we actually sync up the audio with the movie? and you were the one that walked the listener through the process of how to do it right.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I couldn't remember if we did that because I think we did it on one other movie too.
The 2009 Star Trek.
Yeah, I did that one too, didn't I?
J.J. Abrams, the Elon Musk of sci-fi directors.
There you go. Yeah, I loved that. That Jurassic Park recording was probably one of my favorite things that we ever did.
I really need to watch that with the science sort of audio.
Hilarious. I
have not done it.
Amazing and totally worthwhile.
Those shows, the science sort of theaters, we did the two. We did Jurassic Park and we did the 2009 Star Trek. And I think if we were ever going to go back to it, the next one we had set up was the core, because we were going to do paleo, astronomy, geology. We were going to try to go through all the sciences, but we just never got around to it because they're the most difficult things in the world to schedule.
Yeah. Because
you have to schedule so much time.
Yeah. And now we're across 10 different time zones.
Yeah. That's not an exaggeration. But they're super easy to edit because I can't cut any ums and ahs. I just silence everything out because I can't change the timestamps.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was really glad that Cameron wrote in and let us know that was still really funny and just to remind people that those are things that exist in the back catalog.
Yeah.
Did I tell you guys that I went to see a showing of Jurassic Park at the Hollywood Bowl where all the music was played live by the LA Philharmonic Orchestra?
I think you have told me that.
It was dope. The problem is the LA Phil is so good that you totally forget they're there and you just watch the movie.
You need a punk band.
Yeah.
Or you need Jeff Goldblum to do the lyrics.
Right.
Have you heard the lyrics, Jacob?
In Jurassic Park.
Scary. No, it's so the lyrics are, in Jurassic Park, scary in the dark. I'm so scared that I'll be eaten.
Related note, have you watched The World According to Jeff Goldblum on Disney Plus? It's fantastic. You should watch it.
It's pretty hilarious because I think Jeff Goldblum I don't think Jeff Goldblum was always the Jeff Goldblum of our imagination.
He's the anti-Elon Musk. He's just pure delightfulness.
He's a total character now. He's a caricature of himself. He's playing the character that we imagine him to be, and that has now become his real personality.
Yeah, he's Dr. Ian Malcolm turned up to 11 full time.
He had a internet show with College Humor or something that he did a few episodes of where it's like Cooking with Jeff. It's sort of a cooking show, but it's mostly Jeff Goldblum going to Ralph's or Safeway or whatever the big supermarket chain in Southern California is, interacting with the people who are just trying to work there. Be like, can you? I need a fruit. I need something with a pop and a zest and oh, what's your name? Oh, hello. It's just him being that, and then spending very little time with the actual quote unquote celebrity guest that he's supposed to be cooking something with, and then there's a 90-second clip of just all the times that he screws up in the cooking process. And if I'm having a bad day, I will go watch this 90-second clip of him just cutting an avocado all wrong, and Bryce Dallas Howard, another Jurassic Park person, trying to correct him while he's just chopping this avocado to be. It's so funny. It means nothing to anybody who hasn't seen it. So let's move on.
All right.
No, I haven't seen that television show, but a television show I have seen is The Expanse, and the book I'm reading right now is the most recent Expanse book, and it's real good. Joe, what's your email?
Good transition. So we got an email from Andrew S. subject generation ship. So I assume this is in response to episode something or other.
Yep. It's basically, I just pulled this one because it felt like your segment on what was your segment you guys had? Where you figured stuff out?
Oh, the brainstorm.
Oh, yeah. Brainstorm.
Yeah, I tried to find you a brainstorm.
Well, so I think this is in response to the last time you tried to find us a brainstorm, and we talked about a generation ship with Kelly.
Well, Jacob wasn't here.
When Jacob was not here.
So, let's do it again. Who cares?
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying. Andrew is responding to that episode by saying, "Hi, guys. My name is Andrew, and I'm an aerospace engineering student, and I have a few ideas about interstellar travel. I think animals would be pretty important, not just for a functioning biosystem, but for the medical applications as new diseases crop up, and they will. The ship needs to be fully capable of dealing with them, so rats for medical research would be handy, as would pigs for heart valves and probably a few others. This also provides more variety in things for people to do." So we had talked a bunch about whether or not animals would be a good idea.
This is episode 303.
There we go.
The email was from Steve-O, space O, and we tried to figure out. We talked a little bit about building it was a multi-generational ship, which I guess any generation ship is a multi-generational ship. And I did plug, Jacob, 7 Eves and The Expanse. So
nice.
But we can do that again. It's never too soon to replug 7 Eves.
So Andrew continues, radiation shielding does not have to be a big deal. Water offers very good protection from radiation. You're going to need a hell of a lot of it for a self-sustaining biosystem, so why not use that? So you could water jacket the outside of the ship is what he's saying. Water also has a benefit that it can be pumped around to where the shielding is needed most. As for crime and punishment, I don't think anyone would be spaced, as was mentioned on the show, our show, episode 303. He says every calorie is important, which I guess means we're going to eat humans. So why would you blow a bunch of them out into space? If human consumption is not palatable, at the very least, the worst criminals would be a valuable source of organs and fertilizer. Dark. Thanks, Andrew. All right. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for the email.
That's it's like how you can tell someone's an engineer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why throw away that calorie?
I also have a question in terms of the water as a radiation shield. The idea is you need water for a self-sustaining biosystem, but if you're using your water to soak up a bunch of radiation, would that water then not be it's irradiated water? So you're not going to want to put it on your crops. You're going to kill all the crops.
I'm not 100% sure on this, but they cover that in 7 Eves because in the ships that they make, they call them the arklets. They have water surrounding the outside, and that water is also used to fertilize to feed the plants that are growing inside the arklets. But
so I think we should
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say we should briefly explain the premise of 7 Eves so people have some clue what we're talking about.
I can do that. So 7 Eves is a really good science fiction book. If you haven't had a chance to read it yet, go read it. Basic idea.
If you haven't had a chance to read 1,000 pages of science fiction.
Yeah, it's totally worth it though. I just binge read that book. I don't know if that's the right word.
It's one of my favorite novels I've ever read, period, let alone sci-fi. It's amazing. I love it.
Yeah. Humanity has to escape Earth because the moon has exploded and is about to rain down fire and destruction on Earth. And so they make these spaceships that are like house-sized or maybe a little bit bigger than a house, and they mass produce them to try to get as many humans as possible off Earth before the rain of fire comes down. And they call them arklets. Yeah.
The moon exploded, and then they started building these?
Yeah, so the moon explodes in the first chapter, or the first paragraph of the book.
First paragraph, yeah.
When we say explode, do we mean slowly broke apart? It only takes a couple days to get from the Earth to the moon.
So I think the first sentence of the book is we never found out what it was that exploded the moon.
Yeah, so basically what happened was they think that something struck the moon and broke it apart. It didn't necessarily explode like a bomb. It's like it just cracked apart as if it got struck by a railgun.
It broke into 7 giant pieces, and then 2 of those pieces collided with each other and created 4 pieces. And then they did a bunch of math and realized those collisions are going to keep happening. And eventually there's just going to be
because of gravity.
There's just going to be a blanket of lunar rock around the entire Earth atmosphere. And all that rock is going to start to deorbit and enter the atmosphere, and when it does, the friction that it's going to create is going to superheat the atmosphere to the point where we're just going to turn the entire Earth into an oven, and it's going to become an unlivable hellscape.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it didn't really explode; it just started breaking apart. Got it.
Something hit it. Yeah. We never find out what.
Yeah, a hellscape for 10,000 years too.
Yeah.
And all of that math was supported by scientists. Neil Stephenson went out and got actual like physicists to say, yeah, if that were to happen to the moon, this is probably what would happen in real life. Imagine like a rogue meteor traveling through the solar system at some fraction of the speed of light, and it's made of, I don't know, some extremely extremely hard mineral like tungsten or something, and it just strikes the moon with such momentum that it breaks the moon apart but doesn't necessarily knock it out of orbit. That would be how we would die.
Gotcha.
We covered a story a couple episodes ago, and I think Joe was on that episode, where there was a new model, newer than the book, so like newer science in that, where it suggested that if you did break apart an astronomical body like that, its own gravity would tend to just pull itself back together. Mm-hmm. So, it was supported by the science at the time. It might not actually work that way, but it makes for a really interesting countdown to Armageddon. So where the goal is just to get as many people off of Earth as possible. And then once they're off of Earth, how do they survive in orbit for generations?
Right. So the arklets are the individual little pieces of what becomes the arc of humanity to save humankind. And each one of those spaceships has water shielding around it. And in the books, I'm fairly certain that they said that filtering out the water is fairly easy.
Filtering out the radiation?
The radiation from the water is fairly easy. I don't know if that's true or not.
How's the water in Flint these days? Where are we putting our priorities into deradiating water? Anyway, different problems. Okay, so that was my first thing that I balked at, was the using the water for both shielding and for bioavailable purposes, but it sounds like that's something we can work around. Yeah, I guess one of the things, Jacob, that we really talked about was like whether you would need a bunch of animals on the ship with you.
Yeah.
and then crime and punishment, as you surmised or read. So, yeah, what are we thinking? Are there any new cool ideas in the thoughts of an interstellar generation ship?
I don't know how much actual research is done on this outside of just hypothetical science fiction style stuff. But The Expanse and Seven Eves and also the Three Body Problem.
Yeah, Ben keeps pitching those books. I haven't read them yet.
They're good too, but they all kind of have slightly different takes on what a generation ship might look like. But generally speaking, like I think food sources is one of those things that is very different depending on how you imagine your future scenario. Like in Seven Eves, they were escaping just to survive. So they didn't care what their protein source was. They just needed calories and protein. But on The Expanse, they were traveling to another star system. They had farmland inside of their generation ship. So
what was it called? The Mormon one?
Yeah. I can't remember what it was called at the time. The Nauvoo. That's what it was. The Nauvoo.
Do you know where that name comes from?
No, I don't.
It's I think it's a town in Indiana, town in Illinois, where it was one of the first places that the Mormons settled, and then they were run out of town.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then they get their ship stolen from them in the Expanse.
Spoilers.
Yes, Expanse spoilers.
Yeah.
It's been out for a while, Joe. Come on.
I think in terms of like a real life generation ship, like one where you're doing it with planning and purpose, yeah, having animals is probably going to be necessary. And the only real analog we have for that are to look at early settlers that came from Europe and Africa, like when the Vikings settled Iceland and Greenland and some of these other areas, they always took farm animals with them. Now, granted, they didn't have the technology to make. Sure, they didn't have. They probably couldn't mass produce crickets. They couldn't. Didn't have advanced technology to formulate synthetic meat or anything like that.
Now, are you saying, like the Mayflower, we should just fly until we run out of beer and then stop at whatever the next star system we get to?
I mean, maybe, yeah. Go for the closest one,
And hope that there's Native Americans there that can help you.
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah. Now, realistically,
too soon.
Have you guys read? Have you read the Bobiverse books?
No. What are those?
No.
Okay, so there's
I've not even heard of them.
Okay, they are great. It is science fiction comedy.
Is this a kid's book?
No, but it's actually really good science fiction. The first one is called We Are Legion, We Are Bob. And the idea is that this guy was some tech billionaire, like Elon Musk, and he signed on to this brand new...
Should I just bleep every time Jacob says his name, Joe?
Maybe.
Would that be funny?
It might.
he signs on this new insurance policy where if he dies and somebody can get to his body soon enough, they will freeze his head. They will cryo-freeze his brain. And they said that like the insurance policy pays for the storage of your head until technology gets to the point where we can recover your brain. And so he dies, he wakes up in the future, and his brain has been replicated inside of a computer, and now he's a slave. And he lives as a computer that is being trained to become a von Neumann probe. Have you ever heard of a von Neumann probe?
Nope.
It is a self-replicating satellite that's designed to travel the universe and make more of itself. So it would go to the next closest solar system. It would collect raw material. It would replicate and create another one of itself. So the Bobiverse is the universe of Bobs that he's created by replicating himself.
Wow.
It's really good.
That's a crappy way to spend eternity.
I think it sounds great. I would be so excited to have Rhinoverse. What do you think about spacing people versus eating and fertilizing people?
I think it depends on the context. If you're going on a generational journey with purpose where you're trying to found a new homeland, but there's still all of humanity left on Earth or in the solar system, then you get rid of those people, you space them, you make sure that I think there's a stronger message being sent if you space somebody.
I think you're right. I was thinking about this too. Like, I am not a person who supports capital punishment. Like, I don't think it's a good thing that exists in human society.
Agreed.
I don't support it in our current political system, nor any political system. I just don't support capital punishment. I don't think the government should be allowed to kill its citizens. Like, that's just my take. It, to me, it's pretty straightforward. But if you have like 1,000 people, right? Mm-hmm. The message that spacing the first bad actor does, I don't think you space many more people. Like,
yeah,
I think you just, as long as you do the math, this is where it gets dark. As long as you do the math where you're like, we can afford to space at least 12 people before we got to start fertilizing them. like you make sure that you're not existing on the caloric edge of My Beloved Sloths where like any lost leaf is a potential death sentence. Like, no. Just make sure you've got enough extra calories lying around that you can send the message required.
Right.
And then you're good.
Now, if you're in a survival of the species mode, then yeah, you got to use those. You got to get those calories.
Yeah. In 70s, I'm sure that they were fertilizing the people.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that became a sticking point at one point in the story with the president up there doing stuff. I can't remember.
I mean, also, like, you want to get way dark with it? Like, okay, how about, you space somebody, and then everyone in the ship, sees that, like, oh, no, okay, sorry. I was trying to come up with a random name, came up with Joe, didn't mean for it to be Joe.
Wow. Joe's getting spaced.
Hieronymus. Oh, no, Hieronymus committed a crime. They're going to get spaced. And then, like, but realistically, as long as you didn't show the worker people in their little like MMUs, their little man maneuvering units with the net catching it to bring it back for the recycler, like then best of both worlds.
Yeah, secrets don't last very long in a closed society.
I mean, yeah, Jacob already figured out Starlink.
Exactly. So. Clearly a government conspiracy.
Point proven. All right. Well, on that very dark note, let's lighten things up a little bit because Benajmin K is a Patron contributor to the show. He's contributing at a high enough level that Benajmin K gets a thesis. Benajmin K also lives in the DC metro area, Joe, and we failed to try to meet up with him while you were in town.
Yeah, you failed.
Apologies, Ben. I'm failed. But Ben, I'm still around. So, if you want to hang out at some point, Abe's around too. We'll make something happen. So, I will follow up with that on you personally, but I just want to put that out there that you are not forgotten. But so Jacob, the way that this works is based on everything we've talked about, from eating criminals to eating Elon Musk. We got to figure it out in the form of a thesis for our buddy Ben here, for our buddy Benjamin.
Okay.
So TOWs, Elon Musk, satellites, generation ship, batteries, putting batteries in TOWs. Where are we at? What are you thinking, Joe?
First, I'm thinking he clearly goes by Benjamin, and you've been calling him Ben, so I'm sure he's going to stop donating now.
I I've called him Ben accidentally a few times. I'm trying to use Benjamin. It's admittedly not my default, but I will try. I managed to figure out how to never call Jacob Jake, so I think I can do this.
I just call him Stumpers. I don't really.
Yeah. Okay, so how can we come up with an acronym for the word Stumpers? Because that, to me, is like you cut off a toe, right?
Starlink is your S.
Satellites.
Satellites.
I was. So does this? You think this needs to have an acronym? You're probably right.
They often do.
They often do because it makes them stupider.
Let's see. Satellite transmitted.
Umbilical, multifaceted.
Not Musk. Satellite. Olfactory, not olfactory. Crap.
Okay, I've got something. I've got a notepad up. Evolutionary link of mammalian supervillain. So that's Elon, ELON, with an S at the end.
I don't want to. He doesn't deserve an acronym. I like Stumpers.
Okay, I'll try to go from Stumpers then. Okay.
Jacob's hating this.
I don't appreciate being called Stumpers, but
I know.
I'll play along with it.
Satellite transmitted umbilical multifaceted precision emulated resonators. That means nothing.
It means nothing at all.
Doesn't have to be Stumpers. So Jacob, this is basically like our really awkward bad scientist improv game.
And it gets heavily edited, don't worry.
Okay.
Everything gets tightened up so it sounds like we were just riffing the whole time.
Okay. Yeah. Satellite transmission of
we don't have to use Stumpers. Also, we can do something with toes. Like, is toe the acronym, Joe?
Sure. It's shorter. It's easier. Transmitted olfactory emission.
Okay.
Colon musky something.
Is Benjamin figuring out a way to provide internet through olfactory signals?
Oh, I like that. I do like that. No, he's transmitting smells over the internet.
Okay.
It's a transmitted olfactory emission. Yeah, he's transmitting smells. It's like smell-o-vision. So, development of
transmitted olfactory emissions using satellite uplinks to transmit smellular data.
There you go. That's it.
Wait, type it in.
I did.
Again.
Okay, hang on. Scrolling. Transmitted olfactory emissions using satellite uplinks to transmit smellular data. Just change transmit to like send or distribute.
Distribute's good. Distribute's good.
Yeah.
Just so we don't use transmit twice.
Perfect. Transmitted olfactory emissions toe using satellite uplinks to distribute smellular data.
I love it. That's great.
See, Jacob, it's fun.
And it doesn't say, and it's not Stumpers.
No, so we got rid of Stumpers. That's how the segment goes. You gotta start somewhere, and you gotta kind of percolate and figure out where you're going from there. Well, Benjamin, thank you so much for being a contributor to the show on Patreon. If you are interested in becoming a contributor on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/sciencesortof. Science sort of all one word. Avoid the ellipses because internet URLs don't like ellipses.
Because
internet. Thanks for joining us, Jacob.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. Just give me a call.
You're welcome back anytime.
Yeah, I'm available more often now than I have been for the last, 5 years?
And now that you've reset your Slack password, you can get back on Slack and see what's going on.
No, I won't do that.
But you could.
Those notifications.
The point is you could.
I can't because there are so many notifications and I already have too many in my life. That's why I got rid of Facebook.
Well, you can keep having gotten rid of Facebook and just bring your we are your actual friends asking you for this.
I know.
You can set it to be
Slack's not a social.
When people tag you.
Here's what I'll do.
It's not a social network. It's an actual network of your friends.
I know.
That's what I do.
It still gives me notifications all the freaking time.
Yeah, no, Jacob. I need to set it up so when it's my name.
Yeah, and I'll set it up so that it emails me so that I don't have to have Slack constantly open my computer.
Get your daily Slack digest.
No, Just notification. Just notify me when you're scheduling. Okay. That's all I need.
Yeah. Yes, dear.
Only posted scheduling with Jacob's name.
Exactly. Yes. If when you're planning an episode, just say, "Hey, Jacob, are you available?"
Is anyone available to Jacob this week's Jacob?
I do not abuse this power.
I did throw out you probably don't even check the email account anymore, but I did definitely throw out, like, send your hate mail to Jacob at Science Sort of recently within the past couple episodes. So
yeah, like the last episode,
I still get the email, but nobody's been sending me hate mail.
Now you know. Jacob at sciencesortof.com. Thanks for joining me, guys. Do either of you have anything you need to plug? Any plugs?
No plugs.
Just go read Seven Eves.
Yeah, Seven Eves is good. So is the Three Body Problem and the sequel, and the third book is not as good, but the first one and the second one are great.
I'll get to it at some point.
And The World According to Jeff Goldblum on Disney Plus.
All right.
Have you guys watched Ad Astra yet?
I want to. It's on my list.
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet either. Apparently the opening scene is awesome.
Apparently
doesn't seem like it'd be a good candidate for Science Sort of Theater.
No, it's probably not funny.
Yeah. Or iconic.
Does it need to be funny though?
I mean, I guess Jurassic Park isn't really that funny.
But Jurassic Park's iconic. Like, it has to be either
right,
it has to be either like iconic or ridiculous.
Yeah.
So some friends of mine,
Wait, I have to end the show. Why are we? What is happening? Let me end the show.
I don't know. You went off on a tangent.
He brought up Ad Astra. He doesn't know what we're.
End the show.
He doesn't know what we're doing.
I thought you were done. I don't know what you're doing. I thought you were done already.
We haven't said the words yet.
You haven't said the words. Gods, I was strong then. Thanks for joining me. Including everyone who's listening. I'm sorry that this happened at the very end. I thought things were going well. Turns out they weren't going well, but we're going to try again next time because we're going to come back at you with a whole lot more science.
Sort of.
Jacob, you remembered. You did it.
Hooray.
I did.
Visit sciencesortof.com for show notes, links to all the stories we talked about, and ways to interact with the hosts, guests, and other listeners. Science Sort of is brought to you by the Brachiolobe Media Network of podcasts, with audio engineering by Tim Dobbs of the Encyclopedia Brunch podcast. That's all for this week. See you next time on Science Sort of.
Anyway, some friends of mine they changed their living room into a home theater, and they will occasionally host bad science theater movie nights, and we just watch.
Is this your
science fiction? And
do you have a Maryland accent on the word theater?
I don't know, theater.
Yeah,
he's saying it weird, right, Jacob?
Jacob makes fun of me for saying egg, so I don't know.
Yeah, and say button. Say the word button. Push a button.
Button?
I thought you used to say it with
you said
a
it
D,
normal that time.
with a D, like a D
like
in Delta, like button.
Like
button?
Like puddin'?
No, like button.
No, button.
Oh.
The TD shift is actually pretty common.
Yeah.
In a lot of different American dialects. Apparently, Jacob, it's an Appalachian thing that okay. So
yeah, you're the weird one.
I'm gonna test you, Jacob. What's the number that's one more than 9?
10.
And what's the metal that cans are made from sometimes that starts with a T?
10.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew that one. Because Sarah used to always get me for pin and pen.
Yep. P and pen.
It takes me so much effort to say pen. I'm going to write with a pen.
I met a guy at one of the dog shelters, and you're like, "Hi, I'm Ryan. What's your name?" Bean.
Bean.
And I was like, obviously, I'm not trying to make fun of him when I talk about this. It's just funny that like his own name was the perfect encapsulation of his own accent.
Yeah.
The Tin 10, the Tin 10 confabulation. Did you know about this one, Joe?
No, pin and pen. I remember Jacob doing that.
But it's a specific Appalachian thing.
I didn't know that part. Yeah.
One of my favorites, Jacob, is what do charcoal and the three wise men have in common?
I don't know. What?
They both came from afar.
That's good.
Oh, God, there's far.
Far.